the channel. Welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I am your host, Stephen Stark, and joining me shortly will be John Webster. He's having a slight tech issue. He's restarting his computer, and hopefully he'll be joining us very shortly. I just wanted to get started on time, more or less. Everybody's here. Thanks for joining us. Today we'll be talking about the HBO. Or not HBO, God, sorry, that was Watchmen. We'll be talking about the Disney Plus show, The Mandalorian, obviously set in the Star Wars universe. And today we'll just be covering the first 4 episodes. So, we're not going to be getting to the end of the series. We'll be convening again in 2 weeks, hopefully we'll wrap up the series in 2 weeks, and we might have another couple of guests. Today, it's just going to be me and John, but it's just going to be me for these first few minutes at least. So, I assume everyone in the chat has seen the show, at least the first half of the show. I know Ridiculous Ed was like binge watching it yesterday to make it into the stream without being spoiled. But yeah, I actually liked this show a lot more than I thought I would, just because I haven't loved anything Star Wars really since Return of the Jedi. I liked the new movies well enough. I didn't love any of them, but I liked all of them well enough. Yeah, I'm one of those middle ground fans. We're rare. But this I really thoroughly enjoyed, and it might be because it's a little bit away from what Star Wars traditionally tells, which is this huge, big story. And real talk, later on, it feels bigger and bigger as it goes on. But, hey, here's John. Let's see if John is audible.
Can you hear me?
No, I cannot hear you.
Anything?
Hold on. There you go. All right. Good deal.
All right. Was it something you did, or did I?
It might be.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because I was getting audio levels when I checked through StreamYard, so.
Yeah, well, this time you worked just fine.
Okay. All right.
Well, hey, John, welcome back. By the
Hello.
way, how's
everybody doing?
We got a good little crew here ready to talk some Mando, and I was just saying that I really enjoyed this. Really it's the most I've liked Star Wars probably since my childhood. For better or worse, there are movies that came after 1983, and most of them have some sort of redeeming quality, and most of them have some sort of thing that irks me about them. But yeah, this show really kind of struck a chord with me. I just thoroughly enjoyed it start to finish. It wasn't perfect, and we'll get into some of what I thought was less than perfect, but it was really, really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it taps into something that the sort of serials that George Lucas was inspired by, that I just think it radiates Star Wars off the screen. But that's not to say that it's interested in just having the formula of the original movies. It's definitely got its own vibe,
and it's telling. I mean, it feels very episodic, especially in these first few. Mm-hmm. Until you get to the very end, it feels kind of very episodic.
Yeah.
But it does do a good job towards the end of tying all those threads together. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're just talking about the first 4 episodes here. So of these 4, do you have a favorite one?
I think my favorite is probably the opener, the first episode.
Solid.
Yeah. I just think I don't know if it's just because it was the first one, but there's something really cinematic about that first episode that just, grabs me. And I also like the fact that the first little act has an unexpected element of humor. It's almost Marvel-esque in its humor.
That's probably a good way to put it.
At the start, and then it gets darker for the
Right.
remainder of the episode.
That I can't think of the character's name, but the blue alien that's his first mark is Horatio Sands from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, they don't have a name for him in the series, but he is.
You've got notes. You've got it. You guys don't see this. He wrote a wall of text about what we're talking about today.
Hold on. You know what? I was about to make a note of his race, and then I decided against it, but that's all right. I think you get it. I was able to make notes for the first 3 episodes in great detail, and then I ran into a time crunch with episode 4, which I got to watch most of, but no notes. We'll just have to wing it.
Oh, no.
Because we never do that.
Right. I've never been known to just like BS my way through an entire conversation for 2 hours. Only here, folks. You know what to expect. Okay, so let's just start from the beginning then with episode 1, because I think it's my favorite of the bunch too. I think 3 is also really, really strong. But
yeah, 3 was much stronger to me on my rewatch.
Okay.
And I have a question. How many people in the chat have not seen the series? Because I want to be cautious about what I say about future episodes.
Yeah, I mean that I understand. We're pretty much full spoilers here. I think I want to keep the conversation focused on the stories told in the first 4, but
yeah, but if there's character elements that I want to reference for later on, because that comes into play for me with episode 3, so I'll still try and keep it kind of light, but yeah, needless to say, episode 3 held a more emotional weight for me this time around than on my initial viewings. So, but we'll get to that.
Right. But okay. But you did say episode 1, the opener, was your favorite, and there's no better place to start than that. And as I was doing my rewatch over the last couple of days, even from the very beginning, the way they have this sort of musical beep with this sort of swelling sound, it almost sounds like orchestral swelling that goes into a tracking beacon and the wind howling. It's just from the outset, before there is a visual, it's beautiful already.
Well, it sounds like the beep is part of that opening logo, because it kind of matches with how the faces the helmets are being flashed.
Right.
So at first it does sound like kind of a musical accompaniment to the opening logo, and then of course we and go into the episode and we see it's the tracking fob. So but yeah, that's quite ingenious. And before we get started, I would like to make note that this episode was directed by Dave Filoni, who
legend.
I hope that there are people in the chat who know that name, because he is the guy responsible for not completely responsible, but he has been the sort of genius behind Lucasfilm Animation. He worked with George Lucas on the Clone Wars, and then he did Rebels and most recently Resistance.
And he's working on Clone Wars again.
Yes.
Clone Wars Season 7, which is coming out, I don't know, years after Season 6, like a decade or more. But
I know. See, I'm going to try and talk. I know it's been a while since you've seen the other episodes, but I really want to do a stream on the new season. So
I will catch up. I will do my rewatch, because it doesn't become obvious till later, especially in the season, but there's actually a decent amount of tie-ins to some Clone Wars lore in The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Clone Wars and Rebels, and that's it's sort of Filoni's MO that he carries over, certain elements, from series to series, and that's happened again here. And
yes, he's got his things that he loves, and we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks when we get to the end. But like the finale has Filoni's fingerprints all over it.
Yeah.
But I digress. You're right, and I do believe this is the first live action anything Filoni has ever directed.
Yeah, and I was impressed, especially with this opener. And well, we'll leave episode 5 talking until
next time. till the next go around. But it's a strong start, and it's got this sort of like really epic scope that you expect from a Star Wars. It's got the music. Now, it ain't John Williams, but Ludwig Göransson, I believe, is the. Mm-hmm. He does a really fine job of making something distinct to this show that feels like it could be like the Western, that.
The way I described the score when I first heard it for the opening episode was a cross between the spaghetti Western scores of Ennio Morricone and the score to Conan the Barbarian. Because there's elements in that when you get to Kuil's planet and they're riding on the Blurg,
mm-hmm.
and also during the armor sequence, which is reminiscent itself of Conan the Barbarian.
Right. I couldn't help, and I really noticed it the second watch through. I felt like I was playing a video game the whole time. I felt like I was playing Red Dead Mandalorian. A lot of the perspectives give you that feeling of being in a third-person shooter. You complete the tutorial and you go get your armor upgraded, and then you learn how to, eventually now comes the mission where you learn to use the sniper rifle, and it almost feels like I'm playing a video game watching this, in a good way.
Yeah. Episode 3 really feels like that. I'd say I don't want to go too far, but I will just say that it revisits a lot of the same elements and areas of episode 1. So it does feel like you're upgrading to some new level, and
right.
It's very much like that.
And then you go get the mission from the quest giver, and then you go off and you complete the quest, and then you bring it back to the quest giver, and then you go back to your contact in your village to get your next upgrade. It feels like that type of thing to me, but again, they're killing it. I believe these first 4 episodes are the weaker part of the season, and it's great. Even on a second watch, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I would have more strongly made that point before the rewatch, but rewatching these episodes, they were just great. So the fact that the season gets stronger, it's great, but it works phenomenally well, from the get-go.
Right.
Yeah, I just had a couple notes here. Do you mind if I just
go right ahead, man?
Yeah, I assume everybody has watched the show, but maybe if there's anybody who's not as well versed in Star Wars lore, the show takes place about 5 years after the end of Return of the Jedi. So, the New Republic has, taken shape, but the Empire is still out there in fractured elements.
Right. And it's enough time that characters have moved on, but it's not enough time that all the bad stuff we know from the Force Awakens has really happened. Yeah. Everybody's still bright and hopeful for the future at this point. Maybe not everywhere the Mando is going.
Not if you're on a backwater
planet
like the places we see. And in fact, that's, one of the sort of major points that's, made throughout the first season is, the good guys won, but, is it not everybody in the galaxy is feeling the effects.
Right. And I like that, there's all... when you have something that spans that large an area with people who had such extreme beliefs, it shouldn't just disappear overnight. And I like that the remnants are still there, and we see that really early on. But, visually seeing stormtroopers covered in dirt and dust and, kind of like a little bit more relaxed than you would normally see them. Their language, their body language is a little bit more like beat down almost. It does.
Well, yeah, they're mercenaries now.
Yeah.
They're not soldiers,
Right. They're not really stormtroopers anymore. They're former stormtroopers working for some warlord.
Mm-hmm. But no, anyway, so the next thing for some background info, because this may be a lot of people's first introduction to Mandalorians, but Mandalorians have a long history in Star Wars, from Boba Fett and his father Jango Fett from the prequels, who Boba Fett was just known as this really cool looking bounty hunter. And then we find out more about his lineage in the prequel films, as his father, Django, is actually the model for all the clones that get created.
Clones. Dr. Pershing is a Kaminoan.
Oh, I'm getting there.
Okay, go ahead. I'm getting ahead of myself, but you mentioned clones, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Still going. Go ahead.
But and then of course. But that's just, in my opinion, that all is just the tip of the iceberg. The really interesting stuff, and this is why I tell people, don't be put off if you think they're kids shows. Watch Clone Wars and Rebels, because they have some of the most amazing mythology that's brought forth on so many different elements for Star Wars. Because in Clone Wars, you get to actually go to the home planet of Mandalore, and you find out that at that point in time, it's not a planet full of bounty hunters. It's a pacifist, people. And, and a lot of the stuff that goes on in Clone Wars is about the people who believe in the warrior past of the Mandalores to, kind of rise up and take over. And then in Rebels, one of the main characters is a Mandalorian, Sabine.
Yes.
And you find out so much about her family and the history of Mandalore, and something really, really important that comes into play in the finale of this, first season of The Mandalorian.
So I guess mild spoilers potentially for the Clone Wars animated series. Just in case. It's definitely worth a watch. It is Anakin and Obi-Wan as they should have been portrayed in the films.
Absolutely.
You understand, because you actually see their friendship grow and evolve, and it's just that's the Anakin we deserve. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, because when I go read like Star Wars novels, in the new canon novels, and whenever Anakin pops up, that's very much the Anakin that I have in my head. The actor did a phenomenal job bringing him to life, much better than the films, because in Clone Wars he's almost a combination of Han Solo and Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, he kind of is,
which is great for the character, but that's for another
I was just thinking that we've already veered off course. Go ahead, man.
So anyway, lots of background on Mandalore if you go back and watch those shows. And, I think people who have been really hooked into this show would benefit a lot from going back. So that's just my recommendation there. But moving back towards here, let's talk about the introduction to The Mandalorian, where the show presents itself in this first episode, and especially in the opening, and sort of the way you expect the show to play going in, which is this, lone, gunfighter, collecting bounties. And, his, first line, is, before he says anything else, is I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold.
Great line.
It's
Great line.
And
Pedro's voice, I know that it's not always him under the helmet when we see shots on screen. It's not.
Well, especially in this first season, because I believe they actually started shooting some things before they had cast him.
That doesn't surprise me. You know, you get a really good stuntman, physical actor to do that, which Pedro's in great shape, but there are people who are specialists in that sort of thing. And he is not that. He's capable, I'm sure. You know, he did a lot of stuff for Oberyn Martell, but a lot of the wide shots for Oberyn were his stunt double, a wushu master. But voice acting should not be overlooked as an art form. It is truly maybe harder to do than good acting is good voice acting, and Pedro's killing it.
As a matter of fact, and it's funny that this first episode is directed by Filoni, because he probably didn't bat an eye at one of his actors delivering, a voiceover performance. So,
but I guess the hard part for him would have been like directing the physical parts of it, because that's something he's never done. Voice acting, that's the easy part for him.
But no, so what follows is just what I said before, some great comedy, especially first something is played as comedy, which is when they're looking for a ride out to the ship, and it says no droids, and it's not quite as hard hitting as come to believe later on. But what's hilarious is the second guy who pulls up in this broken down speeder, and I don't know the actor's name, but
that actor is Brian Posehn. He's very funny. He's a comedic actor, and he's very, very funny.
Yeah, I recognize him from The Big Bang Theory, and it's just sort of this, anybody who has fears about being overwhelmed by Star Wars lore in the opening episode, I think it's kind of a relief to find, something that's almost, broad comedy in the opening minutes. Just it's brilliantly played. And then we get our first big action sequence as they're, escaping the planet.
Yeah. And we get at least the first one that I can recognize. Shout out to the Star Wars Holiday Special, of which there are at least 2 in this episode. But the first one is the rifle.
Oh, yes.
Which is based on the rifle that Boba Fett had in the animated short in the Star Wars Holiday Special, which, for the record, I watched again recently. It's just as bad as I remember, but
I had never seen it before, and I started watching it, and after a certain point, I was like, this is worse than I could have ever imagined.
Right.
You figure it's overplayed.
Right. No, it's really that bad. It's really that bad. See, it's the type of thing that you need to get 5 people around together to watch together so you can at least laugh at it together. It's terrible. It really is. But you're not a real Star Wars fan unless you've seen the Star Wars Holiday Special. Let me light that stick of dynamite and just throw it out there and see what happens.
That said, I did skip forward to the animated sequence, and it's not half bad.
It's not. Although Han Solo's face in that, I just forgot how bad that was. Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. Anyway, but yes, that rifle, along with the shocking ability that it has, is sort of established in the Star Wars Holiday Special from 1978. And then, of course, he mentions Life Day. The bounty, his first bounty,
which of course at the time that I watched the first episode, I hadn't seen any of the holiday special yet, so that just completely went over my head.
Right,
but then I saw so many people mentioned it, and then after I saw the holiday special, I'm like, oh God, Favreau really, really has this weird affinity for it.
It really does. OTDA points out that there's a channel called Blind Wave. They're good guys. I met them at Con of Thrones. They're very cool. They reacted to the Star Wars Holiday Special and released that video yesterday. Full disclosure, I knew they were doing that, so I watched it ahead of time, and I watched their reaction. It is hilarious. So you might want to check that out. It's pretty funny. If you do go watch that, just tell them that that I sent you, that you got sent by Here Be Dragons, and we'll take full credit for however many views that ends up being. But it's pretty funny, and the Life Day reference too is just a nod, and I think it's that Favreau loves it in some weird, messed up way. So yeah.
Which, it's only because he's such a talented filmmaker that, we can overlook that and we still got a fantastic show, because otherwise that would concern me.
We all have those things that we love that we blush when we admit it. Rocky Horror Picture Show. I love that movie. It's ridiculous and stupid, but I love it. Anyway, I digress. So this scene where he's tracking down his first bounty actually does a lot to establish not only the world, which it needs to feel like Star Wars, but it needs to feel like its own thing at the same time. But it also establishes the character of the Mandalorian, the silent protagonist, which is another common trope of, video games, which is another reason it feels like a video game to me sometimes, but we're shown that disrespecting his armor is a big no-no. We're shown that he will kill you dead in a quick, fast, and in a hurry if you give him a reason to. He's pretty no nonsense. He gets things done his way. He is not a man with whom you can bargain. And that is important for his character going forward. By the time we get to the, halfway through episode 3, he's changed somewhat by his experiences over these first couple of episodes.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, that's a very powerful moment come episode 3. And it really occurred to me this time through how, what a powerful moment that is. And it shows how successful his character development is over these first 3 episodes. And with minimal dialogue, it's quite a feat.
Yeah. Most of his, again, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold. No droids. And he doesn't really say anything else until what? I guess not, or probably not, or whatever he says is he's shoving him into the carbonite chamber. Which, when did carbonite freezing just become a thing that everybody does? And,
I know. That didn't even occur to me until somebody pointed it out.
Right.
It's like, wait a second. It's not like that was a thing that people were doing. But I guess in the 5 years since Return of the Jedi, it's become common knowledge that, hey, this is the new thing.
Right. It got out, apparently.
But let's go ahead and move on to the Bounty Hunters Guild, because it is already 6:30 and I'm realizing we have 4 of these things to get through.
Yeah. Well, we're going to digress. We might have to cut short certain things. It's all right. So let's make sure we talk about the things we want to make sure we talk about. You know what I mean? And you're right. The Bounty Hunters Guild does introduce, again, it establishes the Empire is in shambles. I don't want Empire credits. I want these Mon Calamari flan, which they're named after a food, and their money is named after a food. I thought that was kind of funny, actually. So, but if you tried to feed me calamari flan, I don't think I actually want that.
And see, and so you can tell that I really just
Right.
am bursting at the seams for Clone Wars talk. But what's great is, first of all, I don't even know if you're not tuned into Star Wars lore, if you even know the significance when they say calamari. But having seen Clone Wars, it conjures up images of their underground world and the wars that they fought. Otherwise, if you recognize the species, you might just think it's a trap.
Right.
But
right. There's more to the Mon Calamari than that. My favorite character from Rogue One was the Mon Cal, the Admiral Raddus. Yeah, he was my favorite character in that movie for whatever weird reason. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, it's a nice piece of world building. Now, I want to talk about Grief Karga, played by Carl Weathers, who
charisma dripping off of that man.
Yeah, and what I love is that he's very much playing a showman in this, because if the way he sort of holds himself and conducts himself, he makes proclamations sort of rather than casual conversation, at least until later on in the series.
Right.
But yeah, he's just a blast, and the rapport he has with the Mandalorian, where he's like, save the theatrics.
Right.
So they've kind of played this game before.
Right. Well, and it doesn't work on him anyway. You can't, we've already seen, you can't smooth talk this guy. He wants to get his business done and get on with his life.
Yeah.
But after that scene, we do see that he is driven by more than greed, because up to this point, he's just a get the job done, get paid, get the next job type. But then when we finally do see the covert, we get almost a lore dump right there.
And commenting just once more on the money he's paid was interesting, as he presents the calamari flan to the armor along with the Beskar. So, when he's, talking about, how he wants to be paid, and, that won't even cover fuel these days. But the reality is the money is not for him. It goes to the tribe.
Right.
And you're not going to give the tribe Imperial credits.
Right.
For reasons that become illuminated as the series goes on.
Yes. And that's a really good point. I don't even know if I necessarily fired that neuron myself about how it would look him bringing in Imperial credits. It didn't even occur to me. But you're right. It absolutely. And, by the time we get to episode 3, there's very little doubt how they would react, because there's a reaction, know. But I did love the armor played by Emily Swallow.
Emily Swallow, yeah.
Okay. I don't really know her, but she carried herself well. Her voice had authority. She was really interesting to look at armor-wise. I love the fur across her shoulders. Nice touch.
Yeah, as soon as we had that scene with her, I think I remember commenting at the time, man, I really hope we'd see her again, because she just instantly it felt like a really great character, and we're not disappointed in that. We get some really good stuff with her throughout the season.
Yeah, we really do. There's not a whole lot of characters that recur, but the ones that do are fantastic.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned Werner Herzog yet. And there's no way we can move on without mentioning Werner Herzog.
We skipped right over that.
Because he hadn't gone to get the new bounty yet.
Yes, he had, because he comes to the covert with the Beskar.
Oh, you're right, with the Beskar
from the client.
My bad. I skipped right over it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about the sequence of going to the client, which starts off with a great nod to Star Wars fans of old, with I'm ashamed that I don't know the droid's actual name, but we can call him the trash bin droid.
No, it's called a gonk droid.
The gonk droid, yeah. Which is great. Some people may say, fan service, but
no, it's a generator. It's a walking power generator.
Yeah.
So of course they're everywhere.
But Werner Herzog, man, he just sort of oozes authority and creepiness.
And nobody does a plosive tea better than him. At least not since Alan Rickman died.
Yeah.
That really distinct T at the end of words. It's especially in a British accent, it's just like when you hear that, you're automatically, that's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Only bad guys do plosives on their ending consonants like that. And nobody does it quite like him. Granted, he's got a German accent, but it works.
Yeah. And, just sort of his threatening nature in this scene, not to skip ahead to the end of the scene, but, he gets less and less subtle about it as the season goes on. But in the opening, he says it is good to restore the Beskar to a Mandalorian, and it is good to restore the proper order of things.
Oh, what a loaded comment.
Yeah, he's very much sort of putting, it's meant, on the surface, it's meant to sound like, he's doing him a favor, but it's reminding him of what happened in the past.
Well, and it's also like, to me, it says, I'm trying to bring the Empire back. There was a period of instability over these last 5 years. It will be good to restore the natural order of things, which from his point of view probably is the Empire, from a certain point of view. But yeah, Werner Herzog just eats up that whole scene, man. Although you did point out here that Dr. Pershing, and I see in your notes, it's literally Dr. Pershing, the actor's name, and then it says Camino Connection, ? So you were right there with me. I looked up Camino badges, and it definitely is the same.
Yeah, for people who aren't as well versed in, who may not remember Camino from Attack of the Clones, they are the people responsible for the clone army. So it gives you a hint as to what their intentions are with the aforementioned asset.
Which I'm just going to call it Baby Yoda. We don't have a better name for it. We know it's not actually Yoda. Yoda died 5 years ago at this point at the age of 900, but we don't have a better thing, so Baby Yoda it is. Okay. You can call it the child if you like.
I did it in my notes in an official capacity. I refer to him as the child, but yeah, we can do Baby Yoda. That's fine by me.
Either way, we all know what we're talking about, but yeah, so if we say Baby Yoda or the child, we're just going to use them interchangeably. And by the way, great reference there, Nessie. That's them cloners. Dexter Jetster line from the worst Star Wars movie, which is still not as bad as people make it out to be.
That's a really fun scene from that movie.
Yeah. Anna agrees. It's a Camino badge. Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. Let's get back to the thing.
We talked about but before we go past the covert, I'd like to mention this is the first time we get a flashback of the past of the Mandalorian, and we see that his home was attacked as a child, and I believe that's all we see at this point. We get more specific as it goes on.
Yeah, but it's very choppy at this point.
Yeah. But since what's nice is I believe the next time there's a flashback, we see that it was separatist droids who attacked, which are the droids of the Trade Federation. Actually, let me correct that. It's from the separatist army, but the Trade Federation droids are the dumber ones. So
right. And the Trade Federation was part of the separatist army.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But okay, let's go ahead and talk about just one of the best characters as Mando heads out on his mission.
Are you talking about Ugnulty?
I am. Queel, I have spoken.
I have spoken. That great character who I wanted to get more of his backstory, and not every things he says in these first few episodes. Something like, I worked a long time. It'll be nice. Mando eventually offers him a spot on the crew, and he's like, no. I'm free from that now. I don't serve anyone anymore. And I'm like, ooh, there's a story there. Unfortunately, we don't get that story, but it is what it is,
Let's see, this is the great thing about Star Wars, as different stories are told in the future, whether it's through television, film, or even the novels, we may yet get more Queel. And
right.
Excited about that prospect to see how his backstory might intersect with other future characters.
Yeah, he kind of plays the Yoda Obi-Wan role in this. I
love how there's a different connotation every time he says "I have spoken," especially in this first episode.
Okay.
You want me to go through the
Yeah, I mean, tell me what you want to tell me about it.
Well, it's in the first time he says it after he's saved the Mandalorian. He's saying, "I will help you. I have spoken." It's a way of just sort of him reaching out and offering help and sort of hammering home that he's very serious about extending his hand. The second time when he's telling Mando that he needs to learn how to ride the blurg. He's saying, "I have spoken. Like, there will be no argument. You're doing this."
See, that's what I took. His "I have spoken" is like, don't. I think it means the same thing every time, which is, don't test me on this because I'm not talking about it anymore.
And then the third time, it's really just sort of when he's parting from the Mandalorian, before he goes in to find Baby Yoda, it's almost a pardon,
right.
It says, "I have spoken." So
it's like Smurf. It can mean anything.
Your mom is right. It is kind of
right.
Star Wars version of "I am Groot."
Yep. Thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, he does eventually learn to ride the blurg, which we get a shout out to some Mandalorian lore there with your ancestors rode the great mythosaur. Surely you can handle this blurg, which, by the way, is a terrible name, which means it's a great name for a Star Wars creature. So that's what I have to say about blurgs, other than, they look dangerous.
Yeah, they may look dangerous, but less so when somebody's riding them, because then it looks a bit humorous.
Again, Red Dead Mandalorian. Instead of riding my horse across the plains of New Austin, you're riding a blurg across the canyon flap, whatever. And I thought the landscape was really cool because so I'm from Texas, and in Texas we have different kinds of dirt depending on where you are. Some of it has way more clay, some of it has less. that clay type dirt, when it gets wet and then when it gets really soaking wet and then dries, it makes these big cracks, to crack into pieces about this big on the ground. To me, that planet looks like they took a camera and zoomed way in close so that you have these almost flat tops with these huge, deep canyons cutting all through it. And, me as a kid running around playing in the mud, it brought me back to my childhood in a really weird way. I just had a great appreciation for that landscape in particular that they were writing the blurgs over.
Yeah, and another shout out to the composer for this scene, because the music really soars over this sequence, and it's just this episode really, because I wasn't entirely sure about the selection of composer for this, because I do have to make a confession that I was, not as blown away by his work on Black Panther as a lot of people were, but the music for Mandalorian has just been phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. He's killing it.
And so he gets to his destination, and but he finds that he's not alone.
Yes, he's got maybe my favorite droid I've ever seen in Star Wars that's not named R2-D2. Okay, sorry, R2. Forgive me, R2. Forgive me.
Which is, it really is the perfect thing for Mandalorian to have to work together with this bounty droid, and he hates droids.
Right. And we don't know yet, really. I mean, we don't know necessarily why, because I don't think we see droids in his first flashback.
No, I don't think so.
So we don't really know why, other than just, no droids. But yeah, it's the shootout is such a great sequence. Taika Waititi, who is doing the voice acting for it, is just fantastic.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mean, my big disappointment at the end of this episode was when the Mandalorian has to, take him out because he's, been ordered to kill the baby, which is interesting. We're skipping ahead a little bit, but I do want to talk about that, because that's a distinctly different directive than the Mandalorian is given, which is, he's given dead is acceptable, but we prefer alive.
Right.
But what's interesting is he's given that directive because Dr. Pershing is in the room. I suspect that that IG-11 was given his orders directly from the client and the client alone, and the client may not care at all.
There may be more than one entity after the child. It's possible that more than one person has put a bounty on the child, and perhaps the client and Dr. Pershing do want it alive, but others just want to make sure it's dead so that it doesn't fall into someone else's hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a possibility, and it might even be Moff Gideon, who is way too early to talk about him in any detail, but that's a thought I had. But we'll bring that up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, because I'm interested to see if that particular thread is elaborated upon in season 2.
Right.
Which we're a far way away from, so we won't get into that. But yeah, let's talk about the shootout itself, because this is a brilliantly executed sequence, and kudos to Dave Filoni, especially since he hadn't done live action before. But this works really well, and I love the shot where IG-11 is just spinning around in all different directions, taking things out left and right. I mean, it's just like, there's so much of the show that's Western inspired, and that just, it takes after one of those great, old Western shootout scenes.
Yeah, parts of it do. Parts of it feel like a video game. I mean, literally, as I was watching it, there
Well,
were so many, like over the shoulder, like Mando's in frame, but you can only see like 80% of his head, his back, and his shoulder, and his gun. Third person camera mode. He even, they get to the end of the shootout and he jumps on the Gatling gun, which I'm like, that feels like, the end of the shootout level in a video game. But again, it's all in the best possible way, I think.
But see, I find this really interesting because you're a big video game guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big film guy. So it's very interesting that we come at from these two different points of view, where you see the, sort of video game, elements. And to me, I'm thinking of, all the old Western films and things of that nature. But yeah, that's great. I love that we, see it from those two perspectives.
Well, I've said it many, many times. I do love film and television as well, but like it's got a different feel from most that I watch. Just saying.
Yeah. And then of course
I do want to look at this. Apparently, Human says it's funny because I assume you're a she. Your photo is a she. I hope that is okay with you. Says that I loved The Mandalorian, but didn't like The Witcher because it felt too much like a video game. Spoiler, I haven't watched The Witcher yet, but I do intend to.
Soon. I've been watching it, but I have never played the video games. Yeah. So for me, I can certainly see where people might feel that way, but I think since I haven't played the video games, I don't see it like that. And I've been enjoying The Witcher, with some, with some, reservations, just because I think it's one of those that there's flaws, but it's fun nonetheless.
Right. I'll get to it eventually. Again, we've got Expanse next week. We've got Mandalorian again the week after that, maybe some, and I'm getting into the part of my work schedule where all of a sudden my schedule is picking up a lot again. So, I see you, Kelly. That's apparently Human is Catherine Harding. Hi, Kat. Good to see you. I assume that's what you mean, Kelly. But anyway, let's get to the end. Let's try to get to the end of this episode, because there's not a whole lot else to say other than it is a beautiful shootout for reasons that you said, for reasons that I said, but it's hilarious because IG-11 keeps trying to blow himself up. He's just like ready. He's not going to wait to throw himself on a grenade. He's just going to like, I've got a grenade here with me, It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
And there's something about the way they animated that character as well. Because I don't know how a motion capture artist could get that sort of like... And maybe they did have someone do some mocap, because it almost feels human at times, and other times it feels like no person can possibly move like that.
Yeah, I wonder if there was an element of animatronic, or if it was entirely CGI. If it's entirely CGI, it's fantastically well done.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That's something I have to look more into, because
however they did it, I loved the way IG-11 moved. It was like jerky, but with precision, and which is not something we normally see, because most droids are people in suits. They move like people trying to move like robots.
Yeah.
But like anybody that's been around, industrial machinery, or like, things move with precision, and they move and stop, and there's not acceleration and deceleration the same way. They nailed it. Whoever, from top to bottom, they just killed it. And I actually think that it probably is CGI, but they're doing it with one of the great people who knows animation best in the world. So can't imagine that it was that big a technical challenge for them.
And I love the moment when after they've blasted through everything, and IG-11 says, "How do we get in?" And they both at the same time turn around and look at the big gun.
Right.
And so they blast their way in, and then we get the big moment.
Yeah, the big moment, and nobody saw that coming. I don't care who you are. You couldn't have predicted that. But so did you know from the back shot what it was?
Yeah, when they show the ears, sort of the back of the head, it's, pretty definitive right off the bat. And then, the comment about the age, it's like, it's one of those like moments where you're just holding on for the ultimate reveal. You're like, is that? I think it is. And
yeah.
And then you see it's a little Baby Yoda.
I think I was like, from the back, that silhouette with the ears, and like, it's so unmistakable. I'm just like, no way. And then the full reveal, even the hand coming up from behind, I'm like, it really is. And who would have ever thought that they would do that? But it's going to go down as one of the greatest reveals.
I do want to make a comment sort of about the discussion that was going on before the show came out, which was, is this going to appeal to anybody outside diehard Star Wars fans? Because people thought a TV show about a Mandalorian, yes, all of us Star Wars geeks were gonna line up for anything Star Wars television, and we were gonna be excited because we like the Mandalorians from Clone Wars and Rebel, but were general audiences going to care if it wasn't a Skywalker with a lightsaber,
right?
But nobody could have foreseen that they had this ace of their sleeve with Baby Yoda. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about it.
Right.
It's insane.
And I feel bad for people who live outside the USA, Canada, and Denmark? Is that who else has Disney Plus? Because they're spoiled on one of the greatest surprises this show has. There's still lots of reason to watch it, despite being. But you can't live on Earth and be on the internet and not know that Baby Yoda exists at this point. Meme of 2019.
I am positive that there are people who have no idea what the Mandalorian is, but you say the Baby Yoda Show, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about that."
Yeah. Oh yeah, Baby Yoda. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy, and I have literally referred to it as the Baby Yoda Show myself.
And what's great, and this is where, since we're kind of okay with spoilers, I do want to point this out because it's really important, which is that moment where the Mandalorian reaches out his hand, and and Baby Yoda reaches up his. It's a direct mirror to the final episode when we see the flashback when he's a child and the Mandalorian is reaching out his arm.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, you can see it in his face at the end of the episode. The way he, that helmet, you can't see his eyes, but he's staring intently, not taking his eyes off. And after we had the flashback from the armor, we're kind of aware of what's got to be going on in his head,
Yeah.
All right, John. Anything else you need to say about episode 1?
No, I think we covered it pretty in depth.
Right. Okay. So that having been said, we've been going for an hour, which is usually when I'm like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to shout out Ridiculous Ed Tollett, my #1 patron. Guy gets a shout out every week because he is the top patron. You too can get your shout out every week. Patreon link is down in the description. We are trying to upgrade the camera still. and then we're whatever is next after that. We're always trying to grow and make better. And Here Be Dragons is a channel that's not just me anymore. For those of you that haven't seen some of my more recent previous streams, John and Nessie both are basically full-time hosts on the channel with me. I like their takes. I like the way they think. And obviously, John and I have very different backgrounds, and we come to a lot of different conclusions, but we somehow end up loving the same stuff anyway. So yeah, but Sean, Ridiculous Ed Tollett, you're the man, and you remind us every week why we keep going. Also, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Like the stream, it helps it get seen a little bit better. And if there's some kind of content that we haven't covered that you would like to see us talk about, feel free to shoot us a message on Twitter. My Twitter, John's Twitter, the official channel Twitter, they're all down in the description. So yeah, do that thing. And one of the things, by the way, I don't know if y'all noticed, but we had a nice looking title card for this video, which I never have. But these are the benefits of bringing somebody who knows what they're doing with that type of stuff onto the team. So I do want to give you a big shout out, John, for making that happen, because it looks fantastic.
Thanks. It's funny because I downloaded some new software just to do that, but the problem with the program was it's good that it's free, but it's like really elaborate in terms of the things you have to do to it's not
right.
It's not an easy software to use. But all the same, I had so much fun putting that together, and I'm really glad you like it.
Yeah, well, it just means that we're going to look a little bit slicker going forward, and because we have an editor on the team now, maybe we'll do something with some edited content eventually. Right now, we're just trying to keep up to these weekly streams. That being said, I do want to remind everybody that next week, the stream is about the end of season 4 of The Expanse. We'll be talking about the last few episodes there and closing up that story for the season. And then the week after that, we will be covering the back half of the first season of The Mandalorian. So, and then again, thanks for coming by. I hope you guys have enjoyed what we've talked about so far, and I think I'm ready to jump back in. You ready, John?
I am ready.
Okay, so we talked about a lot of generalizations in the first episode, so I feel like these later ones should be able to go a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So, we'll try to keep them to about 20 minutes a segment to keep it in the 2-hour mark. What do you say?
Yeah.
All right.
Do that. And this one should be easy enough to do that because The Child is quite a brief episode.
It is.
It starts off this, sort of standalone, if not completely standalone, more mission of the week style episode that will populate especially the middle chunk of the first season.
Right.
And it starts off really with, the beginnings of the bond forming between Mando and Baby Yoda with, and we start off with an action sequence where he's protecting him, and then he has to do some work on repairing his armor, and Baby Yoda goes over to try and we don't know exactly yet, but we have an idea that he's trying to heal him because, oh my God, looks like he probably has some force powers.
Right. Well, thinking that somebody who from Yoda species is a powerful force user isn't that big of a stretch. If you're well enough versed in Star Wars, you've probably seen force healing somewhere, Knights of the Old Republic, or, I'm not sure what other media it's been in, but, force healing is definitely a thing.
Yeah, and especially, this is not a stream about the new film that's out in theaters, but this is something that's brought up in that film as well. And I don't believe that it was a coincidence that this episode aired days before that movie came out. So,
right. The two are not really connected. They are not, other than they both take place in the Star Wars universe. So if, at least not that I can really determine. The movies and the Baby Yoda show.
Yeah. I just wanted to, and because your mom is asking what program I used for the photo editing, it's called GIMP, which is free to use, but it takes a devil of a time figuring out how to use.
Well, again, that's like your area of expertise. When you need something engineered, I got you. But don't ask me to edit nothing.
But yeah, so
I see that you have written down puppetry.
Yeah, because Baby Yoda is done. There are some parts where, and I suspect CGI enhancements are used, but at its core, Baby Yoda is, done, predominantly with puppetry.
Some of the scenes where, especially if you're getting a back shot and Baby Yoda's walking, I can pretty well tell that it's CGI. But you're right, probably 95% of it is puppetry.
And somebody mentioned in the chat, which is, a great anecdote from Werner Herzog, which is that when they were shooting scenes with the client and Baby Yoda in episode 3, Jon Favreau had wanted to do a pass without the puppet in case they decided to go full CGI for the scene, and Werner Herzog said, "You cowards," and called them out for it.
Right.
So I don't know if they ultimately ended up doing that or not, but evidently he was, thinking that they should have, supreme confidence in the puppet.
Yeah, it looks fantastic and really cute, and clearly it's a whatever Yoda is, which, for the record, I'm sure most of you already know, that species has not been named. It's been kept in the dark since 1980, purposely. George Lucas has never answered it, has never allowed anyone else to go there either. There are a few other characters of that species sprinkled throughout other Star Wars lore. Probably the most famous is another Jedi Master called Yaddle. But yeah, they're incredibly rare. What is known is that they live a long, long time. They are native to some swamp planet, and they are carnivorous, all of which we kind of see between eating frogs and bone broth and what have you. But on this one, you're right. This is the first time where we're like actually seeing the baby very much, and the puppetry is fantastic, and the characterization they give is fantastic. You believe it's a little baby thing, like a 1-year-old, basically.
Yeah. But so the problem that the two of them encounter, of course, is Mando is trying to get to the next stage of his mission, is that their ship is being essentially stripped for parts by Jawas, and in one of the most shocking scenes to me, because it just is it's not something you expect to see. And Mando takes his pulse rifle and starts disintegrating Jawas.
Yeah, like to me, as soon as that happened, the first time, I was like, I just saw Darth Vader going, "No disintegrations," and I'm like, "There's a reason he had to tell Boba Fett, cut that crap out." It's kind of horrific, man.
Yeah. But this whole sequence was a lot of fun because I loved seeing inside the sandcrawler as the Jawas are driving away and Mando is trying to climb up it. Because, we've seen inside the sandcrawler where like the droids are being held, but we've never seen them at the wheel.
Right.
Sort of. And it was a fun glimpse into an area that, that you haven't gotten to see before. And it was fun how they were essentially, beating Mando, because, that's another thing. The show was presented as, this tough lone warrior who's a badass. And in the second episode, we have him having, his ass handed to him by Jawas. And,
it's kind of
it's
great, actually. The thing is, like, I don't know if Jawas always steal, or if that's just how they're portrayed on TV, and it's racist to think that Jawas always steal. But it is a distinction that Quill eventually makes, that they don't destroy things. They're, acquiring them. They're not trying to destroy anything. They're trying to repurpose it for something they can actually use, which is interesting enough, but like, man, he goes hard on them. No wonder they don't like you, dude. Of course, nobody wants to have their ship stripped for parts, and if they would have gotten away with a lot of stuff no matter what he did. But I don't know that disintegrating, 5 or 6 of them is the right answer.
I mean, it's just like you said, it is sort of, shocking just to see, these Jawas who we, despite their interest in, in stealing stuff, we do kind of view as these cute little, creatures, even if, they're mischievous. Just seeing them obliterated by our protagonist. But of course, which side note, I find it hilarious, that, he essentially, when he's risked with losing his ship, he pretty much, just runs off without Baby Yoda, but Baby Yoda catches up to him.
Well, at this point, he's had a moment, but I think he's still so into, like, the bounty hunter code that it's not, he doesn't realize that he's had a moment, even though he's had a moment. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm not even talking about that. I mean, he's potentially giving up his bounty,
Well, what good is his bounty if he can't get off the planet?
Yeah, exactly.
And I've seen the rest of that planet. I'd want to get out of there too.
Of course, without a ship, he's led back to our, wonderful Ugnaught Quill. And we get, and this is where we get our scene of, Baby Yoda eating a frog, which
is, the 100 fire first place badge. It was great. I loved it. So funny. Hey, spit that out. Gulp. Again, carnivorous. Baby's got to eat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved seeing Quill again, because there was the potential for him to be a one-off character.
Well, and it's kind of how it felt,
Yeah. But what's great about that is because, it does make these episodes feel of a piece more than they would otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, and you need Quill, because without him, he doesn't get his parts back, because Quill takes him to barter with the Jawas. And what follows is a really funny exchange, because Mando's not really having it. He still wants to take his stuff back by force. Right. So, the part where he just unleashes with his flamethrower.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can ever count on a Mandalorian being fully unarmed, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
He's going to have a flamethrower or a whistling bird or something for you. But, yeah, I enjoyed the way that they were making fun of, like, his accent or whatever. To me, that was almost the best part of that whole exchange, was them mocking him for his bad Jawa speak,
What's funny is they seem to take his, having disintegrated some of their people in stride, because they're still willing to conduct business and making fun of him all the while. So
which gets us to the egg.
The egg. Which is confusing at first because you think they're still potentially talking about the egg that Baby Yoda is residing in. So it catches you off guard for a second. Yeah. And until you realize, wait, they're interested in some kind of, actual egg.
And I'm sorry, I've got to bring this up. Anna points out, even his toilet was stolen. Yes, you are correct. His what is it, vac tube or whatever? Yeah. Hilarious. Go ahead.
But so then here's his, mission of the week, which he has to go and steal a Mudhorn's egg, which at first you think is going to contain some kind of offspring, but apparently it doesn't. It's a Jawa delicacy, apparently.
Or, Jawa drugs, maybe. I'm not sure what, but like they could not wait to get into that thing and were willing to trade an entire spaceship's worth of stuff for it.
It's a genuinely weird moment.
It was genuinely, maybe the weirdest moment in the whole series.
Yeah.
With all the Jawas like dipping their hands in there and just like, gross, y'all. Come on. But it is what it is. It was good. It really was.
But before that,
the Mudhorn fight itself, yes, quite epic. I had a hard time watching it simply because, and this is just a peculiarity with me, I hate mud. I don't like muddy, I'm just like, ugh. Like when he's all caked in mud during the fight, I'm like, dude, go get hosed off, please. But yeah, other than that, pretty epic as far as like visually speaking goes.
Yeah, what's interesting from a Star Wars lore perspective, it's not the same species, but it does bring to mind that big horn creature from Attack of the Clones.
Yeah,
in the arena, and also it's kind of eye-opening how much visual effects have improved since 2002 because this has a reality to it. Where, speaking of video games, there's a lot of Attack of the Clones that looks like a video game, And so, this was just a really visually amazing sequence. And I do kind of love towards the end, before Baby Yoda intervenes, when Mando's just sort of holding out his knife. It's sort of like that sort of, almost cliche hero moment where, they take out, a small weapon as a last moment of desperation. And then something else intervenes. But yeah, then we see Baby Yoda, use the Force.
Fully.
Yeah, like this is, on the scale of Yoda, taking the X-Wing out of, the swamp in Empire. Of course, but it drains him.
Yeah, he can't do it for long. He's only he's not a full Yoda. He's only a baby Yoda, so he gets tired easy. But yeah, and like you said earlier in the episode, they hinted there's some, at Force powers. We all know the hand wave magic hand thing. That's the best joke in the series. It doesn't come till later. We'll get to it in a couple weeks. But yeah, like telekinesis is probably the first Force power that we really can learn to quantify. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it binds everything together. It controls your actions, but it obeys your commands. That what it did was really unclear in the original movie, which I will call A New Hope, only to like bother you, because I know that it bothers you. So there you go. But
Star Wars.
But like, use the Force, Luke, is more like it feels more like believe in yourself, at least as far as episode 4 goes. I tend to think that he shot those proton torpedoes straight, and he used the force to turn them 90 degrees to go down the exhaust port, which if you watch, that's what happens. They get to the exhaust port and they make a 90-degree turn to go down. So that's using the force to me. But yeah, telekinesis is one of the early ones. We see it often in Star Wars. So I think it makes sense. It's a very easy visual tell as to what's going on there.
And so let's jump to the end real quick so that we can move.
Yeah.
On. I think we are running a bit behind.
We go over a little bit. I'm not too worried about it.
I really like this moment at the end with Kuil, with where he says to him, I don't have the exact sentence written down, but and something to the effect of good luck delivering the child, may it bring you a handsome reward. And then he says, I have spoken. And it's sort of this, I'm daring you to go ahead with this.
Right.
You know it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that will have an effect, moving forward into the next episode.
Yeah, it will. And I think Kuil serves a particular, he's a character without any kind of arc to be had at all, which is okay. His character serves less as an arc to follow and more as, a pivot point for the Mandalorian. There's a couple of characters that have genuine arcs in the season, not just the title character. But Kuil is the wise master in the hero's journey, and Star Wars is very tied up in that idea that the hero of 1,000 faces. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost as Star Wars as it gets to talk about that, because when people talk about the book, I can't remember the author's name who wrote the hero with 1,000 faces or the monomyth. But like Star Wars is like maybe for a modern audience, one of the most perfect examples of that. So seeing elements of that sprinkled throughout the Mandalorian really makes sense to me. And, he is helped along the way by a wise old man who imparts a piece of knowledge to him that he needs to have. I also really like the idea that he's like, I'm going to help you because you're the best warrior to come along. So I'm going to help you so that there can be peace.
Yeah. So, the ending of this episode has very much, again, like an old Western feel to me, where thank you for bringing peace.
Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
All right. So let's go into chapter 3, The Sin, which I love the title of this episode, especially in, jumping ahead a little bit, but the way it plays, with the title card coming up right after, he takes the payment from the client, which, really hammers home not just that, we as the audience see it as a sin, but that he feels that himself.
Yep. That's good structure. Oh, yes. People are saying it's Joseph Campbell's book. You are correct. Yeah. You are correct. Thank you. Got people on top of it. See, we got really smart people in the chat all the time. And as soon as I say that, Pedar Ruan shows up.
I know. I just saw his name and I was so excited, just because we're used to having him for an Expanse stream, but I'm
for the record, Pedar, Expanse next week to finish out season 4. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so like this one, like the whole like taking the knob to play with it like a toy. I have kids, I've been there, where you give them a spoon so they can play with the spoon. That's what babies and toddlers do. So to me, super relatable in that way, you know.
Yeah. Well, but you know, even if it's not, I mean, I don't have any children, but it is like the most adorable thing, and
Right.
you know, and it's crucial as a, you know, a character beat, because it comes back midway through the episode,
Right.
and again at the end.
Right. It's they didn't waste that shot. As cute and cutesy and silly almost as it seems in that moment, you know, it's used to emotional effect. You're right, twice more for different purposes throughout this episode. I actually think that's really great. By the way, I don't think we mentioned last episode was directed by a gentleman called Rick Fumayuwa. I'm sorry, I don't always do my Japanese very well.
Yeah, and I'll have to look up how to pronounce his name for next time. But yeah, it's great because this actually brings up something that I didn't talk about before, even though I made a note about, which is the episode length, which kind of threw me off on my initial viewing, because I went into the show expecting, you know,
Like hour-long drama.
45-minute to an hour episodes. That said, episode 2, well, episode 1 worked perfectly fine, even though it was shorter than I expected. There's really nothing that felt like it was missing. In episode 2, for all the, you know, for all my complaints early on when the show was first starting that I wanted longer episodes, when you look back, there's really, you know, episode 2 is as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, and that's generally, you know, like I think every episode was the right length for the story it was telling.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't want more of the story. You know, you could have made 13 episodes and I would have ate it up, I think. But that might have felt a little bit too episodic for what they were going. So I'm just
but anyway,
happy with what we got.
Yeah, the reason why I was saying is because I think that the director crafted, you know, a wonderful, you know, short story for his episode that hit all the beats that it needed to.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, splendidly directed. And, you know, and same thing goes for episode 3, which was directed by Deborah Chow, because it has the, you know, there's been action beats in the other episodes, but this is like the episode that has like the first all-out big action sequence.
Right. Fun fact, by the way, for those of you that don't know, Dave Filoni, Rick Famuyiwa, and Deborah Chow all appear on screen later in the series, all together in one scene. Do you know what scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's that episode, which is episode 6. I think it's called The Prisoner. I could be wrong.
I think so.
That is an episode full of fun cameos.
Yeah, well, and again, that's 2 weeks from now, which will probably be a little bit longer stream because that's the better part of the season. If you ask me, we probably have more to say. Yeah. But Deborah Chow is the first woman to ever direct a Star Wars anything, and you know, she's also an Asian, which, you know, I'm just glad that these jobs are starting to go to other talented people who aren't, you know, white guys. You know, yeah, John and I are both white guys, but like, I'm really happy to see other perspectives coming into, you know, into the top echelons behind the camera, because their visions are important. You know, Star Wars is for everyone. It needs to be by everyone. And congratulations, Deborah Chow, on being the first lady to direct anything Star Wars, and she killed it. This is a great episode. Which,
little confession, I was not as big of a fan of this episode as other people were when I first saw it. It was the first episode where I actually thought that it could have been longer.
Okay.
just because I felt like I wanted some more character development in places, but I think I was still adjusting to the length of the episode.
Right.
And I think that once you become used to the fact that for the most part, this is a show that is very inspired by, by serials and, and it's, more concise. Once you're used to that, I think you go into the episodes with a different mindset. And I felt that very much going into this episode this time around. Hi, Bernie. Yeah, and this episode also, there's once stuff that's revealed later in the season, I think there's a lot more resonance to things that happen in this episode.
I think, the second watch did wonders for me on this episode. And whatever your nitpicks might be with this particular episode, and I've got a couple, the Deus Ex Mandalorian at the end was kind of like, oh, that's convenient.
But again, it feels like that on a first viewing, but it has a whole different feeling.
I agree.
Afterward, especially once you see the final episode of the season, and the full flashback where he's saved by those Mandalorians who come down on jetpack, and it just, once you have seen that and you watch this episode, that final sequence packed such an emotional wallop.
I tend to agree with that take, but as far as I really enjoyed watching, because this is where he turns. This is where the seeds that have been planted by Quill and by his brief, finger grabbing interaction and the knob and everything, playing with the little ball from the end of the knob, eventually it does come to change him. And, he is not the same at the beginning as he is at the end of this episode.
Yeah, I really want to get to that moment with the knob in the middle of the episode.
Am I skipping something?
What?
I
just want to make sure that we build up to that, because there was other stuff quickly.
Sure.
I want to cover. Just let me look at my notes, which now occurring to me may have been way too in depth for the amount of time that
it's all good. That's why you picked the highlights, man.
Okay, I did want to, the initial the meeting with the clients in this episode, which again goes deeper in sort of the threats, which are not so veiled this time around. When Mando asks, what are your plans for it? And the client says, how uncharacteristic for one of your reputation.
Oh yeah, but
and the code of the guild that these things are now, I forget exactly what he says, but not to be discussed. And then he says, you have received payment. It's a shame that the Beskar steel is easier to find than Mandalorian to wield it. And, it's like,
it's
really
so juicy.
That point that we took your people out. Tread carefully.
And I'm going to say it again. I said it earlier. Werner Herzog and his consonant plosives at the end of his sentences, at the end of his words, man, he is just an uncharacteristic. He's got that pop at the end of every word, at the end of the sentence, and it's just, yep, that's bad guy speak, man. No mistaking it.
And then Mando goes once again to the covert, and this is something that made me really excited, because we see some other Mandalorians come up behind him while he's speaking to the armorer again, and one of those Mandalorians, the one who speaks to him, you can see in the credits his name is Paz Vizsla, which people,
if you
Star
know
Wars
your
fans may know the name Vizsla of Clan Vizsla from the Clone Wars and Rebels. there was a Mandalorian named Pre Vizsla who was the leader of Death Watch, who plotted to take control of Mandalore from its pacifist ruler during the Clone Wars. So there's, a legacy, there.
And if you're not sure who Paz Vizsla is, it's the other Mandalorian who gets into a fight with our Mando. He's got the big 3-barrel cannon. His armor he's got heavier armor than everyone else too.
And they are set straight by the armor, who brings one of the big lines of the series where she says, how can you be a coward if you choose this way of life? This is the way. And then they all repeat, this is the way. Which, again, another thing about my initial viewing, I don't know that I completely bought that line, as sort of everybody was going, this is the way, and I wasn't completely sold on it, because we've never really heard Mandalorians say that in any previous Star Wars, which you wonder if it's something specific to this
it could
tribe.
Be it could be specific to this tribe. It could also be it could be a post-purge thing for all we know.
But having said that, by the time the show's over, I mean, it's just you love to hear that. It's going back and rewatching this episode. It's just, yes. And I want to note what Ed is saying, that both Pre Vizsla from the Clone Wars and Paz Vizsla here are voiced by Jon Favreau. And so, Favreau has a very personal connection to the Mandalorians, which makes him a great showrunner.
Yep. Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. I'm reading the chat. There's smart people in the chat, and they have interesting things to say. Yeah, but I didn't know that Favreau played Vizsla as all of them. That's it's good stuff, man. Yeah, a few people are chiming in. I see Anna saying it was not Favreau. Jon Favreau, not Brett Favre. Although that's pretty funny.
But the scene ends with Mando getting new armor.
Again, he got the mission from the quest giver. He went out. He did the side quest with the Mudhorn. Then he came back and he had to go level up. So it's time for new armor.
But if you pay very close attention, he does not have complete new armor. There is a piece on his right leg, which is still the old armor, which hints at he hasn't completely, covered himself in, sort of, a different kind of armor, which is, he has a weak spot that is going to still be exploited when, he's not able to turn away from Baby Yoda. Right. So that is a nice indicator that, that he's not completely covered up by his new armor. But he walks into, to get his new job, and everybody's watching him because they're all angry at him because he succeeded where they failed, because we find out that they all had tracking fobs and we're all looking for the baby. But as Grief says, but none of them were able to close the job. Right.
But, we've seen his exploits firsthand now at this point. Yeah, he's a badass. Now, he is not the sort of he's not One Punch Man, he's getting beat up by blurgs and, gets beat up by the Mudhorn and, gets cut by the people that jump him at the beginning of episode 2. And, he's having a lot of trouble in the shootout with IG-11. So I think I mean, he's clearly capable, but I think a lot of his ability, a lot of the Mandalorian sort of like legendary status might come from the fact that they have this nigh indestructible armor, you know. And granted, he doesn't miss his shots very often, and they have lots of neat tricks up their sleeve. But like, so does Batman, you know. I think maybe the Mandalorians, they're not superhuman; they're just like highly trained and very well equipped.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, it's all about appearances. You know, he may have trouble on the missions, but as long as he comes back victorious, and especially in this case decked out in all this beautiful new armor, so he presents himself as as a bounty hunter to be feared to his to the rest of the guild,
right?
And we see that Grief has gotten his cut as well. Which
that's kind of like rub him the wrong way, though.
Yeah, it's like, oh great, I could have had a little more Beskar, and it's going to you, instead of the tribe.
Anytime we've seen like when he touched it and when the armorer touched it, they seem to almost have like a religious reverence for it, which makes sense based on what we do know about Mandalorian culture. Their armor is the most important thing to them, more than their weapons. It's their armor. So I would imagine that it would eat him up to see it in Grief Karga's hands.
Yeah. And it's like, and that's, and it's not just that, Grief is, maybe unintentionally, insulting him, but that's a very purposeful insult by the client, because he's like, no, I'm not going to pay Grief Karga in some kind of currency. I'm going to give him some of this Beskar steel that I could have given as payment to the Mandalorian. It's sort of it's just another way of sort of digging the knife in.
Yeah, I don't know that he realized what he was doing, because at least as far as like Carl Weathers' facial acting goes, he just looked like a guy happy to have gotten paid to me. But like, we can't see the Mandalorian's face, but like, I bet his eyes were on fire. He was ready to shoot laser beams. So, but it's from there that like. And I'm not sure if it's just, I'm not sure what exactly is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Visually on the show, it's him going to turn on the engines and there's no ball on the stick, which is the first callback to the beginning of this episode.
That's a beautiful moment because it's given, the scene is given the room to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment of him just sort of taking everything in. And just sort of building up that tension of what's he gonna do, and then he makes that decision, and he's resolved, and and this is what he's going to do. It's a fantastic character moment, because if you get that wrong, the rest of the show does not work as well. Right. You have to believe in this moment that he is completely resolved to risking everything to go back and save this child.
Yeah, and like. But it took him a little while to get there, which tells us how long he's been stuck in this way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But once he makes that decision, it's over. It's like a switch flips in his head, and he is off to do whatever it is, he's going to do in the rest of the episode. Get the baby back.
Yeah, and at first, you wonder for a second if it's too late, because he finds the egg, not that egg, but the egg that's been holding Baby Yoda in essentially the trash, And you wonder, is he too late? Did they already do whatever they're going to do? And,
right. Which we haven't even talked about what we think they're doing. But, you know, they clearly got him hooked up to some medical device, and somebody from Camino was working on him. So I don't know what's really happening there.
Yeah, but we find out in this moment as he, you know, as he takes a moment to spy on the client and Dr. Pershing, that they want to extract something. And then we're also getting our first hint that there's somebody else that they report to.
Yeah.
You know, who ultimately, you know, ends up being, hold on, my mind's gone blank. What's the character's name? Moff Gideon.
Yeah, Moff Gideon. I thought that's who you were talking about. So the thing is, I don't know that there's a whole lot sort of like plot-wise in the rest of this episode to discuss. Once he makes that decision, he is all in, and the rest of the episode becomes really action-focused at that point to, you know, which is just him in conflict with everybody else in the Bounty Hunters Guild trying to get Baby Yoda out. Well, trying to get two, you know, blasting the heck out of stormtroopers and then trying to shoot his way out. Although it is interesting that Pershing sees him, he's like, you know, he'd be dead now if it wasn't for me. That character's coming back in season 2, I guarantee.
Yeah, I made a note about this, about what exactly are Dr. Pershing's intentions, because he's very interesting, because he very much wants the child to be kept alive.
Right.
You know, so he seems to, you know, at least at first glance, you know, we don't know, we'll find out more, but he seems to have a conscience.
At least somewhat.
Yeah, which is interesting, because when the character first appeared in episode 1, I was actually more worried about him than the client, because you have ideas about, you know, what does this doctor want with this, you know, baby, but he's the one who it appears is actually trying to keep him as safe as he can, you know. So it's be very interesting to see what the sort of politics at play were between, you know, Moff Gideon, Dr. Pershing, and the client, and, you know, even though one of those characters may not be around next season, hopefully we'll still find out more about that whole situation, because there's some interesting backstory there that I definitely want to find out more about.
Me too. The only other thing I'm going to make sure that I say is that Grief Karga having that Beskar actually saved his life, you know, carrying the Beskar.
And of course, he assumes, you know, based on a later episode, that Mando would be, you know, surprised to find out that he survived. But my question is, do you think that, you know, Mando shot him in that spot on purpose to spare his life?
He literally showed him where he was keeping it, so
yeah,
it's entirely possible.
So, and then we have, you know, we talked about it a little bit, but we have the Mandalorians come in to, you know, save the day, you know, after Mando is cornered. Other people have referred to it as the John Wick sequence, which I actually haven't seen those movies, so I don't know what that reference is, but I know
John Wick is just the shootiest shooter to ever shoot. Okay? He's just, it's gun fu at its best.
But yeah, and we get another great "this is the way" moment. You know, the Mando says they're going to have to relocate the covert, which apparently I thought at the time that meant relocate it off planet, but evidently they're talking about relocating it underground, which, you know, personally, if it was me, I say get the hell off the planet at that point.
This one of the complaints I can make about the season as a whole is kind of where that ends up at the end. I thought that was, we'll talk about it in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Anything else about this episode before we move on to episode 4?
Just once again, the you know, the ball comes back into play with the very end, where it's that sort of beginning of a paternal relationship between Mando and Baby Yoda. is where we get the hint of it, and that develops much more in the next episode. And if I have one little complaint about this, it's not really a complaint, but it is kind of funny. It's when, Paz Vizsla, comes flying up beside the Razor Crest, gives him the salute. I know that, the salute, makes sense in Mandalorian culture, but it still comes across as like a sort of Captain America type,
it's a little
Rocketeer moment.
Rocketeer. Wow. Good movie though. For those of you,
I love the Rocketeer.
It's actually really good.
I can't recommend it enough. So let's dive.
Let's go on to episode 4 called Sanctuary. So I do have a little bit of notes that I'll look at my notes since you made super detailed notes about the first 4. I'm just going to read off my page here. Okay. So this episode opens with they realize, Mando realizes that they're going to be hunted by bounty hunters all over the place. So he's going to try to find a very out of the way place to hide. And so we are introduced to a forest planet called Sorgan. And our first introduction is we see some people who are, catching some sort of crustacean in their ponds, and they get attacked by bandits. And I really enjoyed the very sort of like tense camera work that they used with the camera under the basket floating in the water.
Well, what's interesting to me is this episode ends visually very different from the other episodes. It's there's a lot of color. It's sort of idyllic.
The village life is.
Yeah.
But I think that's intentional.
Mm-hmm. But then, of course, it does get very gritty and dark as they get attacked, but then, of course, we also have some biblical imagery with when the mother, takes her daughter into the pond with the basket, and they hide under it. It's very, sort of Moses.
I guess you can see it that way, yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you're the one with the notes.
Okay, I do want to mention that this is directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, daughter of my favorite director.
So again, another female director, which is freaking awesome. I love it.
Yeah, we got back-to-back lady directors, and they both did a great job, and they both have action-heavy episodes to do it with. I feel like the last episode was a little more action-packed than this one, but we also got I'll just continue on with my notes. They're not on Sorgan very long before the Mandalorian recognizes somebody, a character called Cara Dune, played by the amazing Gina Carano. You might know her from... She did a movie called Haywire. She wasn't that good. Let's be honest. She was not that good an actress. She's an MMA fighter, and she will snap your head off of your neck without thinking twice. But she was in Deadpool movies, and she's pretty good in Deadpool, and she is perfectly cast in this.
I have a question. You said, though, that he recognizes her. That was not the impression that I got, which was more that, he has a feeling about her that this is someone,
I mean, maybe that's how you felt, and maybe I'm not remembering it correctly from my first watch, but he definitely knows who she is when he sees her.
I don't know. I'll have to disagree on
Given the
that.
context of what they talk about immediately after, she knows who he is. Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely, sir. Yeah, now you make me want to go back and watch it again.
That is not my take on it at all.
Okay.
I don't think they know each other.
Chatters. I mean, obviously, this isn't the scientific answer, but did you feel like those two characters knew each other when they met? Just I'm curious. Okay. So
No, I'm sticking to my guns here.
I mean, everybody, again, everybody can have a different interpretation. I definitely, especially after we get to the point of Baby Yoda sipping on his bone broth, like
Yes, but they've been there. If you take note of the passage of time, they've been there for a while by that point. There's a time jump between when they defend the village and then the end of the episode. They make the note that some months have passed.
no. Bone broth, like when they
okay.
first fight each other and they end up with guns in each other's faces. Like I feel like they knew each other. Okay, most people are agreeing with you that they don't know each other. Makes me want to watch it again and see if I interpret it differently this time.
Well, Ed agrees with you, but
does he? See, that's what I'm saying is the conversation they had afterward made me feel like they did know each other.
No, see, I feel like that's her, like telling him a bit about herself.
Okay.
So no, I think that he's is very aware of his surroundings, and he sees in her and this person that he's concerned might be a bounty hunter.
Right. I mean, again, your interpretation is just as valid, and it might be that it might be that that's the way it is. And again, most people seem to agree with you that that they don't know each other. I just need to watch it again and see what I think.
Well, see, but now I need to watch it again too, because now I feel like, what am I, what elements really, of that am I missing that you had that thought? It'll be interesting to watch it again with that thought.
It would literally just be the first conversation they have after their first fight. That's all I need to watch again. But anyway. I digress. We meet Cara Dune. Oh, that was a heck of a good digression, John. That's what I've been waiting all stream for us to really disagree on something.
See, well, this is the first stream that it's just you and me, so I've had a bit of nervousness, but see, all it took was our first disagreement.
Yeah, and you were right in there, man. You were ready to go. But anyway, we meet Cara Dune. They fight. They stop fighting. She wants him to leave because there's heat on her. She's running from, she suspects he might be after her. So she just wants him gone. The whole planet, not big enough for the two of them. Big planet, nope. She doesn't want to be having it. So he's trying to find then somewhere else to go, and a couple of people from that village show up to try to hire him. And he's like, don't want anything to do with it, until he hears that it's remote. And then he's like, oh, now I'll take the job, because he's just trying to get as far away from everything as he can. But he immediately then turns around and uses the credits that they paid him to pay Cara Dune to come be additional hired muscle. Because again, at this point, he's just trying to keep the child safe.
Well, she says, so we're doing this for lunch money. And,
right.
In which, to him, the payment is a safe place to lay low.
Right.
But just a quick, let me just say a quick bit about Gina Carano, because I didn't really get to,
sure,
talk about her. I did feel in this episode, I think there's some parts where her acting is a little stilted.
She's not an actor first.
Yeah, but having said that, by the end of the season, when she comes back for the last two, I think she had totally grown into her part, and I think she's fantastic in those last couple episodes.
I agree, and she's good here. But again, she comes to acting as a second or maybe even third career behind being a professional athlete and a model first. And
I don't want it to sound like I'm being harsh on her, because I totally get that completely.
Yeah,
but I think it's it's good to recognize that
I am being harsh on her.
that I think she gets more comfortable as she goes on throughout the season, and I think that she is just going to be firing on all cylinders next year. So
I believe that is true, and there's stuff, and maybe that's just down to like in this particular episode, yeah, she's meant to be a powerful fighter, but like we don't get a whole lot of her character development until the back half of the season,
yeah.
Which, like, there's literally, we'll get to that in a couple weeks. I'm sorry. Back to my notes. So he accepts the job. They go to the village and they get housed with the lady who is the widow who was hiding under the basket at the beginning.
Do you have her name?
The character is called Omera.
Okay.
I don't have the actor's name. Hold on. Julia Jones is the actress.
Yeah, she does a really good job.
She does.
This is actually, again, this is an episode that on my first viewing, I thought it was too short because I would have liked a lot more time in the village and character development. But having gone back to it, I think it's got some great moments and, shows in a very short amount of time this, very nice growing relationship, between her and Mando, and that's tough to do when you're dealing with a shorter, runtime.
Maybe she'll make another appearance in a later season.
Yeah,
maybe she won't, and that either way would be okay. I think her character was served well enough in this episode. She's a single mom. She's not looking for the Mando life, maybe they'll go back as a place to hide out eventually, but she is not going to be a member of the crew going forward. I don't think at any point,
But she's capable.
She absolutely could kick your butt if she wanted to.
Yeah, and what's great is, you may want to talk about some of the, really, in my opinion, out of order discussion, regarding, her character that was done online. But what's great is we don't need to know exactly how, she's able to defend herself, because in fact, just the fact alone that she can handle herself is great sort of fodder for, the character, in terms of it's left to us to think of, right. she has an interesting story. Yeah. I wonder what that might be.
She probably fought in the rebellion.
Yeah.
Because the rebellion won the war, 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
So, and her kid, maybe she fought, maybe she was stationed at Yavin 4, fought at Hoth, who knows? But she clearly has fought somewhere before and is trying to settle down to that peaceful life. And again, it's the lone gunslinger has to come to town to save the villagers from the bandits that are raiding. It's the same story, in some ways, repeated from episode 1. But the unique spin that they put on this, I think, is really, really interesting. The ATST being a big part of that. And yes, that is an all-terrain scout transport. For those of you that don't know what those letters stand for, it's also known as the Chicken Walker, as seen in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I will say, it's the small one, not the AT-AT, which it's called an AT-AT, not an AT-AT. Thank you. But I thought the use of that as sort of like the unbeatable bad guy in this episode was really brilliant. And some of the shots in this episode are like straight out of a horror movie. The red eyes in the forest coming after you, the fog, and it's towering over everything in the foggy moonlight. I thought visually this episode was just gorgeous.
Yeah, it really is.
We also get a lot more of the like Mando lore if you'll excuse the pun, Mandalorian lore in this episode. Where he talks about never taking his helmet off, and he's like, "Yeah, I took it off yesterday, actually, but just not around anyone," which will come back into play later in the season.
Which here's one little gripe for the episode, which is he then proceeds to take off his helmet
and look out the window.
The children, it's like, dude, they could look up and see you,
right?
But that's all right.
I noticed that myself, but like, whatever. Maybe he's got like a pantyhose thing on his head. So.
He's ready to hide himself behind the wall at a moment's notice.
They're looking. But it is interesting. And then he and Cara Dune go off to try to like take out the Raiders in their own camp. Come to find out that they have an ATST that they weren't told about. Which, if you're a guy on foot, that's a dangerous, dangerous opponent. And to the point of like, they have to figure out a way to fight it, which they do by trying to dig a deep, deep trap for it in the little fishing ponds that they've constructed that they fish krill out of.
Yeah, but they have to go lure the foot soldiers out first, and they have a situation that becomes a bit tricky where they go to plant explosives, but they're not able to leave because more of them start coming in
right
to fight with them, and what becomes a rather tense scene. But it's great to see the two of them fighting together as these two tough warriors.
Right. Speaking of tough warriors, though, Gina Carano in the back half of this episode is putting on a masterclass on physical acting. Like the way she's jumping, the way she's carrying the gun, the way she's carrying herself, waist deep in the water, in the mud. She is, again, I take shots at her acting sometimes, but there is no doubting her physical capabilities. The woman is a physical specimen that you will find very rarely on Earth. She's incredible. She's that part of the job she's got down. And like you say, I feel like she's gotten better throughout this season. I feel like she's self-conscious about her acting because her first outing in a movie called Haywire, physically there, she was fantastic, but they tried to put her as the lead of a movie and she just wasn't ready for that, Yeah. But I think she's great in this part. Great. But yeah, it's a really great shootout where they teach the villagers to shoot a little bit and defend themselves, which, even a couple hours of training on a rifle goes a long way, I promise you. But they end up fighting off everyone. Now, this is another problem I have, is that they get through the fight without any casualties on the good guy side, which is a little bit Star Wars-y,
Yeah.
Like there were not enough consequences for me, but all in all, it was a successful battle for the good guys. And, Mando is like, all right, we made it safe. I'm going to leave the baby here. And I'm going to go off it because he'll be safe here, which of course he won't. We find out, we get the second fake out holding the gun on Baby Yoda, get shot in the back or shot in the head.
As an audience, we know, It's like, well, of course he's not going to be safe there, which was probably my other little criticism of the episode. It's I don't know that I really buy that Mando should be confident that the baby will be safe here. It's like there's still, bounty hunters out there looking for him, so it's certainly not a surprise to me when one shows up, so.
I just got to give credit for this joke from Padar. It's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, sir. That is all.
But it does, what it does is it sort of sets up the fact that, that he's not going to be able to leave the baby
right.
anywhere.
He's not going to be safe anywhere.
Yeah, that he needs to take him along with him. And eventually, by the end of the season, he has to, go back to, face the music.
Yeah. So, yeah. So from that point on, you're right. He has that realization that the safest place he can be is with me because I actually care and I am able to do something. So yeah, with that, they load back up onto the ship and they leave Cara Dune and Sorgan behind, and they set off for their next adventure, which we will recap next week. Anything else you want to say, John?
Just that there's a moment before they leave where you wonder if he's actually considering, staying and taking off his helmet because because what's her name, the female villager that he's established a relationship.
The character is called Omara.
Omara goes to take off his helmet, and though he does.
Omara,
and so even though he does end up stopping her, he does kind of wait a second. So so you wonder if he's
considers it for a moment. Yeah.
And so that's why I do wonder if the character will come back into play in the future, and if we'll see some kind of development with with that later on. And I know I was reading something where somebody even suggested that perhaps that's even where the show ultimately leads to by the end, with him deciding to hang up his helmet and and even settle in on that planet or maybe some other planet. It's,
who knows,
it'd be interesting to see, but we're a long way off from that.
I'm sorry, I just had this moment of like, she's like, take your helmet off, and he takes his helmet off, and he's not Pedro Pascal. He's like some horribly ugly scarred guy, and she's just like puts the helmet back on.
Right, never mind. You
and the baby need to go. Thanks for all your help. Anyway, yeah, it was funny moment in my head. So I don't have anything else to say about these first 4 episodes. Other than like I say, it's the weak part of the season to me, and I loved it anyway.
Yeah, on my first viewing, I had more quibbles than I do now. It took me a while to adjust to the fact that this was primarily a half-hour show that only had 8 episodes.
But they paced it really well.
Yeah,
what they have,
and it all fits together really nicely by the time the season is over. It's like, and going back to these episodes again, I felt like even this episode, which was, the first one that felt really standalone, episode 2 does a little bit, but it's still connected to the main story because you have Baby Yoda, coming into play for the first time. But on the second viewing, this actually feels more like a piece of a cohesive whole than it did before, because it's laying a lot of building blocks of character
for the later,
that are very important later on.
Right. I agree. Like, it feels more connected on a second viewing than it did on the first. I completely agree.
But no, I think that we've, really dissected these episodes. I don't know that I have anything more that I want to talk about specifically, aside from plunging into the remainder of the episodes, which we'll do.
I don't really have anything else either.
What about anybody in the chat?
Yeah, anybody in the chat got anything we want to make sure we bring up? While we're waiting for people in the chat to sound off, I will remind everybody of the upcoming schedule. So next Sunday we'll be finishing season 4 of The Expanse talk, which The Expanse is my favorite show on TV right now. If you're not watching The Expanse, do yourself a favor and go watch The Expanse. It's fantastic.
It is crazy to me that I feel like because I've been in such a state of constantly watching The Expanse that it feels like it's been forever since I finished watching season 4.
Right.
Which is, hilarious. But
and it came out less than a month ago.
Yeah. But I am going to be doing a full rewatch of the entire season for our final discussion, and I'm really excited about that. But I'm just really depressed about what comes after that.
Yeah, me too, man. Like, we won't have anything for a good long while. Although, like, there's plenty of good stuff out there to watch, so we'll have stuff going forward, and maybe we'll take a look at like filming news or trailers or something.
I had a thought, if you don't like this idea, you can wait to tell me after we're done if you want to let me have it. But I did think, since we do this show on Sunday nights and we're usually wrapped up by around 8:00, we could do an Oscar special. What do you think?
That's great, man. I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, the Oscars are still a couple months away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of tuned out the last couple of years to the Oscars, but I could totally see myself, plunging right back into it. Plus, there's a lot of movies this year that I've really enjoyed. So I would love to do something like that. If you're game, just let me know. If
yeah, I don't have a problem. That sounds like fun. We'll try to get some other movie snobs in here to talk about it. I think it's a great idea. I don't see anybody bringing up anything about the Mandalorian to talk about. So I guess that's it for this week, y'all. We made it a good bit over 2 hours this time, which, I just like to make sure we get that 2 hour mark. I like seeing everybody. I like having, these are good fun conversations to have. And, I always like seeing folks in the chat. You guys make me feel all squishy inside. So yeah, Expanse next week after that, the rest of the Mandalorian, and then going forward from there, who knows? We'll see. We'll see what John's watched, what I've watched. By the way, I know you were watching Avatar: The Last Airbender at some point.
It's unfortunately gotten a little derailed.
Had to be sidelined. I got you.
So much, but I've got, because I bought the Blu-ray set. So it's sitting right there on my shelf. So I am going to plunge into that at some point. So I'm really excited because I enjoyed, I think I watched like the first 8 episodes. And then I think you guys said that's when it starts getting really good.
Yeah, it's like everything you've seen you're probably like, oh, this is really good. And everybody that watches it are like, if you can slog through that part, you can get to the good part. But it's like, actually, it's really good too. But it's just, the later stuff is so good that by comparison, the early seasons seem almost bad. Anyway, yeah, guys, thanks for coming. You know what time it is. It's time for us to call it a night. I've got work, and I've got a lot of work this week. So yeah, got to be up early in the morning. So from myself, thank you very much for coming. For my co-host, John, we appreciate you.
And I just want to say before we go, I could not be more honored, Stephen, that you have asked me to come aboard. I just hope I can, live up to the trust you guys are placing in me.
Well, John, I said it before, we're lucky to have you. You bring something great every time you're on, and your unique point of view and your unique set of skills are both highly, highly welcome and appreciated. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks to everybody in the chat. So I guess that's it. So until next week, y'all, peace. And
bye, guys.
And be excellent to each other.